A political machine designed to last 1,000 years tore itself apart in barely a decade. In that incredibly short window, it orchestrated a campaign of violence that wiped out tens of millions of lives across the globe. This timeline compares the lifespan of historical empires. On the far right, the Third Reich occupies a tiny 12-year sliver. Mapping the regime's power over this timeframe reveals a methodical climb to an absolute peak, followed by a rapid, uncontrollable freefall. The mechanics of this collapse illustrate how quickly a modern state can be dismantled once its internal safeguards are methodically removed. After its defeat in World War I, the German state was physically exhausted and buried under punishing international debts. The government printed massive amounts of currency to pay those obligations, causing the mark's value to evaporate completely. Everyday citizens were reduced to sweeping up stacks of worthless cash just to use as kindling in their stoves. Industries stalled, wiping out the life savings of the middle class and leaving vast segments of the population out of work. Crowds marched through the streets, carrying signs demanding answers for the 2 million unemployed workers standing idle. Adolf Hitler watched this desperation unfold and recognized a distinct political advantage. He realized that a population paralyzed by poverty was uniquely vulnerable to extreme solutions. When people cannot feed their families, the theoretical value of a democratic vote loses its appeal. They become willing to surrender their civil liberties in exchange for the promise of a full stomach and a stable society. The early stages of this takeover did not require military force. Instead, the public was bombarded with highly emotional rhetoric, carefully engineered to scapegoat minorities and project a return to national greatness. By 1933, this relentless messaging strategy had secured enough public and political leverage to officially elevate Hitler to the role of chancellor. Almost immediately, the mechanisms of the Republic were taken apart. Rival political parties were outlawed, independent journalism was crushed, and high-profile critics disappeared. The vibrant, fractured democracy of the 1920s was replaced by rigid, absolute conformity. Massive public rituals were staged to project total unity, enforcing obedience through overwhelming scale and the constant threat of state violence. To maintain control, a dictator must eliminate competing narratives. When citizens exist inside an isolated bubble of state-approved information, the truth becomes entirely subjective. That heavily manufactured domestic power eventually spilled outward into military aggression. German forces moved aggressively into neighboring territories with a speed and tactical coordination that overwhelmed conventional European armies in months. But an autocrat surrounded by loyal subordinates rarely receives honest pushback. Confident in his genius, he ordered a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. The swift mechanized assaults that succeeded in France completely failed in the sprawling, freezing, brutal expanse of the Russian winter. German supply lines snapped, and the campaign degraded into a freezing, attritional bloodbath. Look at this strategic map of the European theater. The failure in the east allowed Soviet forces to push relentlessly from one side, while a massive Allied invasion forced a separate, equally brutal fight on the western borders. The very structure of a dictatorship ensures its vulnerability. Without checks and balances, a single leader's strategic miscalculation becomes an irreversible national suicide pact. Caught in this vice grip, the expansive borders of the Third Reich crumbled inward at astonishing speed. The front lines receded daily, pushing the remaining defenses straight back into the heart of Berlin. By April 1945, the architect of this disaster was hiding in a fortified bunker deep underground. As enemy artillery leveled the streets above him, he ended his own life. Within a matter of days, the surviving military command signed an unconditional surrender, halting the European conflict and officially ending the 12-year timeline. The ideology promising a global empire achieved nothing but the complete annihilation of its own infrastructure and the slaughter of millions of innocent people. Entire cities were reduced to ash and brick. When a society prioritizes hatred and blind allegiance over truth, total destruction becomes the unavoidable conclusion.